All right, welcome back into Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And tonight I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Jack Hammer from All 49ers Sports Illustrated. This is the Hammer and Nail Show, episode 3. And tonight we have the pleasure of being joined by probably, in my opinion, he's got to be one of the most coveted people in 49er land tonight because he coached both of the guys that most of 49er Twitter cannot figure out and want to debate on who should be the pick at number 3. So with that said, Coach McEvoy, thank you so much for joining us. How you doing tonight, my man?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's an exciting time, right, leading up to the draft. And obviously, if you're a 49ers fan, it's about as fun and stressful as it could be right now. And so happy to hopefully add a little insight and help out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that you're definitely going to at least help break the tie in some people's eyes maybe tonight. So hopefully we can at least get that done. So let's just jump right into it. I know that we're pressed for time tonight. So with that said, I know that you work for QB Takeover.
Yeah.
And you've been a part of it for quite some time now. Why don't you explain to us what exactly QB Takeover is and how long you have been a part of it?
Yeah, so Quarterback Takeover kind of came together. It's about 4 years now, and really a partnership with myself and Coach Quincy Avery. And Quincy's a name that a lot of people probably watching here know as well, one of the other top quarterback trainers in the country. So we were kind of doing our own thing here in Atlanta and training quarterbacks and developing from the high school to college all the way up to the NFL level. And about 4 years ago, we decided to come together and kind of built Quarterback Takeover at that point. So now it's, the leading quarterback development platform, working with quarterbacks all over the Atlanta area in youth high school and about 25 to 30 of the top college quarterbacks in the country. And now the NFL list just grows every year as we continue to prep these guys for the draft and are part of that process. And probably about 8 to 10 NFL quarterbacks now.
That's awesome.
Awesome. When a quarterback comes to you, let's say, like, for example, Trey Lance or Justin Fields or one of those, when they come to you, how do you guys go about what you're going to be working on?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate with those guys specifically, and a lot of guys, because we've been able to start working with them early in the process. So Justin Fields is a kid that's worked with Quincy since he was in high school and through the Elite 11 process, and we've worked with him through college. So you start to get a real good understanding of what he does well and maybe what his needs are, right? Trey was a little different in that he came into us really just for the draft prep process, not a quarterback that had a lot of formal training previously and not one that we were familiar with working. So I think first off, it's just kind of evaluating what he is, as best you can in shorts and a t-shirt, what he does well at the position. How consistent is he? What's his footwork look like? What's his upper body throwing mechanics look like? And then you want to very quickly try to establish where are the 3 biggest areas of need for each of these guys, right? So we can start to attack that as quickly as possible. And at the end of the line, it's all about accelerating their development, right? Because these guys need to be ready to play this fall, at college or, right out of the gate here if they get the chance to jump into things here in NFL training camp in a couple months. So you want to make sure that they're ready and prepared and are at the best they can be in a short amount of time.
Great.
Awesome. And one of the questions that I had is, if you're working on it with a quarterback on something like, say, for example, accuracy, that might be one of the things. What are some of the things that you guys do to help, take a quarterback from that might be struggling with that a little bit to the next level?
Yeah, and I love that you ask about accuracy specifically, because it's one of the things that there's a whole school of thought that whatever a quarterback is, that's what he is. And Quincy and I in Quarterback Takeover is a firm belief that you can certainly improve a quarterback's accuracy. And I think there's many examples, maybe Josh Allen, the biggest one recently that comes to mind. But, it's really just about doing things the same every time, right? And that's the common sense answer. If I throw the same way every time, I'm going to get the consistent, accurate results that I'm looking for. And so what you find in quarterbacks is they're maybe not always starting in the same throwing position. Maybe their footwork's a little off, their base gets too wide or too narrow, or they get up on their toes instead of playing with their full cleat in the ground. And so it's not about their throwing motion being bad. They're just trying to do it slightly differently each and every time. And that's what ends up leading to some inaccuracy. And this was something we focused on with Trey. Trey came to us specifically kind of needing / wanting to really work on his intermediate accuracy. It was a part of his game that he felt like was where there was the biggest room to grow and develop. And right away with Trey, it was just, hey, we just got to get you to a more consistent kind of good start position, if you will, and get full cleats in the ground, good stable base, create straight line throws, and then just get his foot in the ground quick to start his motion. And once you kind of start the same way every time, you see the rest of the motion continues to be consistent. So if we can get consistency and just a repeatable throwing motion, that's where kind of the consistent accuracy comes from.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like golf, right? That's what those golfers, that's the whole thing, right? They're out there on the driving range practicing, trying to get that shot down the same every time.
100%. Obviously, on the football field, everything's moving. You don't quite get that same luxury. But no, without a doubt, when you're talking about the biomechanics and you're talking about a rotational athlete, which is what a quarterback is, as well as a golfer, there's a lot of similarities there in what you're trying to focus on.
Okay.
All right. Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Just so that everybody, I mean, obviously we've promoted this as the Lance and Field show, but
sure,
there are so many guys that you've worked with. What are some of the other recognizable names that you have had the pleasure of working with?
Yeah, so if we start at the top of the NFL guys, Deshaun's been the guy that Quincy Avery's been working with from high school, obviously all the way through his NFL career. Josh Dobbs, as we start talking about the draft prep process, we did Dwayne Haskins' draft prep, and he's one of the NFL guys that continues. Last year, we had Jalen Hurts and Ben DiNucci. We took them all the way through the draft prep process. They continue to train with us now. And then this year, obviously, with Trey Lance, with Jamie Newman, Justin Fields, a guy that we've worked with for the last 3 years. And then the college crew, Malik Willis, Emory Jones at Florida, Anthony Brown at Oregon, Sam Hartman at Wake Forest, I think are, kind of names that jump out that certainly people are going to recognize when they hear them.
Okay. So you mentioned Trey Lance.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Justin. What are the things that you would say set them apart in this quarterback class from maybe some of their peers?
Yeah. I kind of tweeted about this a couple weeks ago. It might have been where we connected in the first place. And I made the point that, to me, they're including Trevor in that group. So Trevor and then Justin and Trey. To me, they're the guys in this draft class who are, I call special. And what I mean when I say special, I mean they're uniquely talented, right? Yeah. You're talking about a combination, a really rare combination of good, strong, accurate, really good throwers of the football, which is always going to be number one, no matter how much this game changes. But then you combine that with just freakish athletic ability, right? You're talking about a guy in Justin Fields who runs a 4.4 40, right? And, you can count on one hand the number of quarterbacks who have that ability and that special of an athlete. Trey, to me, breaks the mold in size plus athleticism. You think about the way they're describing Kyle Pitts here, and here's a tight end that's never been able to do. Well, that's the way I think of Trey. He's just his size and his athleticism and his speed and just the way he runs powerfully, but once again, plays in the pocket and can make all the throws. Trevor has that same aspect as well with how athletic he is for a big quote unquote pocket passer. That added dimension and that combination. To me, they're the only 3 guys in the draft this year that I see that in. And so you look back at the last few drafts, okay, who was like that? Right. And the guys that come to mind are the guys that we think of as the top quarterbacks, the Deshaun Watsons, the Pat Mahomes of the world, right? The Lamar Jackson, just different. We haven't really seen guys like that before. Even Josh Allen, right, with his combination of pocket passing with all the extra athletic ability, and so now you say, okay, who were the hicks of the last 4 drafts? Well, it was the special guys. It was the uniquely talented guys.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And when I look at Trey Lance, to me, out of all of the quarterbacks in this draft, he's the one that's the hardest to get a beat on as far as a comparison.
Yeah.
Josh Allen to me was the same way. And I felt back then that Josh Allen was special. And a lot of people talked about the accuracy issues and it didn't concern me as much. For me, accuracy at the college level is probably one of the most overrated stats from a percentage standpoint, a completion percentage standpoint. Okay. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily display accuracy, in my opinion. Scheme goes into a lot of that and what have you. So when you say Trey Lance breaks the mold, I completely get what you're saying because I don't have a comp for him. Do you have a comp for him?
I really don't, and I don't like comps in general, right? Because I feel like it always is a slight to one of the two guys, right? Like,
right.
Oh, this guy's the next, Lamar Jackson, but he throws better than Lamar, so that's not fair. And he also probably doesn't run as much as Lamar, so either way, I feel like one of the two guys gets slighted every time you make a comparison. But no, I mean, the comp, just his size. You can okay. So who are the other guys that were 6'4" plus and 225 and had that big broad? Well, none of those guys were guys that were running 4.5, sub 4.6.
Right.
None of those guys was elusive the way he is as a runner. So you see a little bit of Cam Newton there as a runner and a physical, but what he does as a polished passer is certainly above where Cam was coming out of college, right? And just his grasp of, it's the one thing that I don't think people understand about NDSU is just how high level their offense is and how much is put on the quarterback to be able to run that offense. He's just a guy that just is different. He's just different. Like I said, so we talked about all the guys we've worked with, Quincy and I, over the last 5 years. I've never seen anyone like him.
Yeah.
He's that different.
And some big names too.
Sure.
Yeah. I've done a lot of film breakdowns of the various quarterbacks in the draft. Trey was one of them. When I first looked at him, to be honest with you, this was back in January. I wasn't really all that excited about him, but then I got to admit, then once the trade was made and the 49ers jumped up to 3 and you knew they were really going to be going quarterback, I kind of took a deeper dive into his film and was watching it and kind of came out with a little bit different impression. But my question to you really is, what are some things when you're watching film on Trey that people might miss, some little nuances maybe to the game that might not show up to somebody that doesn't know what's happening?
Yeah, I think the first thing you got to see is, I think everybody thinks of him as like, oh, he's this guy who can really run and did a lot of that at North Dakota State. And he certainly did, right? Especially in moments when they needed him to do it, in bad weather or, circumstances where the pass game wasn't clicking, he was able to win a different way. But I think you see the way he moves in the pocket to be able to throw, the way he's able to, in a tight space, avoid pressure, regain his platform, and still drive the ball down the field. That's, to me, what started to jump out early in the draft prep process when we started to watch his film. And then you see a guy who can certainly make the throws all over the field. Which, once again, we're talking about the top guys here. You expect that piece of it. But you watch the way he puts the balls on some comebacks on the sideline and some, 6-step outs, from the left hash all the way to the right side and vice versa. That ball's getting on receivers differently. Justin Fields is probably the only one, in my opinion, that has the same type of arm that Trey Lance has in this draft. But, those are the things that jump out to me. But more than anything, if you watch this film and if you got the all 22 copy and not just the highlights, watch the 15 to 20 seconds before the play. And this is where you start to understand what the expectation is for Trey to run that whole offense. Because he comes up to the line and, some of this has been spoken about, but, their play call might be the formation and then it might be the protection, but it's the protection for them is just combo, which means he's going to go up to the line, see what the defensive front is, see where his threats are, and then he's going to call the protection at the line. And then as far as the concept, half the time they're just going to say Trey. Now, that means Trey's going to decide at the line what concept he wants run on the front side and what the complementary option is on the back side. That's their play call. So they're going in saying, all right, we're going to throw. This is a pass play, this formation, and then you put us in a good situation. And so you watch, that's the way they run their offense. It's what Carson Wentz did when he was there. It's what Easton Stick did, and it's what they expected of Trey, even as a freshman, right, in the 1 year he started. So I think if you watch the way he manipulates and calls them, he's not one of the guys that's looking at the sideline to see what the coach is telling him to run, right? He's
Right,
up
totally.
there diagnosing the defense and putting them in the best situation. So that to me is really unique. And your question, Jack, was about a nuance. I think that's certainly it. That maybe some people may miss, but you're talking about it. Can we project how talented or what his opportunity is at the next level to be successful early? I think that's a big thing that translates.
So he's actually getting up to the line of scrimmage, looking at the defensive set, and he's the one that's making the decisions on what they're going to be running at that point.
Yeah, so it was funny because we went through this. Part of the draft prep process is you're putting them on the board, right? And okay, all right, Trey, give me an opener, right? Draw that up on the board. So the first thing we talk about having a process, right? So we want to work through, and if you're trying to speak to a coach or speak to anybody, you want to have a very easy to follow process. So the first thing we do is we draw the play up, and you're used to seeing, okay, right twings, 320, stick, like every part of the play is written out there and what's coming. And Trey's concepts are, the formation, okay, whatever, Bronco, right, and then it's like 60 combo Trey. We're like, 60 combo Trey? Like, what's that? So then I go up and it's 60, so it's a 6-man protection. But I decide if we're going to have the right side the man side or the left side the man side, or where we're going to slide. That's on me based on what I see. And then, we might have 12 different options in the formation as pass concepts. So I kind of look at, see what coverage I have, see what my matchups look like, and then I'll pick the one that works best for me. And obviously that's a lot of trust in the coaching staff in him to put them in the correct situation. And it's a testament to that North Dakota coaching staff for preparing him to be able to make those types of decisions on the fly in games.
Yeah, that last part is huge. That preparation that they're getting from that coaching staff is really big at the next level.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's so funny because the number of times, so you get Max as part of this process, you want to try to bring in as much help as you can for all the quarterbacks they're going through. So we brought in some ex-NFL coaches and some different college coaches and really smart guys. And hey, sit with Trey on the board, go through protection, make sure he's getting maybe something that we can't give him. Make sure he's just seeing different viewpoints. And the number of times that would turn into the coach just asking Trey to teach him something, when it was supposed to be the other way around. It was just kind of comical, but it turns into like, whoa, that's really interesting. So at North Dakota State, how do you, show me how you block your power read, right? Most of our quarterbacks, they know the pass stuff, and then they know who to hand off to in the run game. But, right. His understanding of really top to bottom, just his football IQ is really like nothing I've been around before, especially if the biggest knock on him is he's only 20 years old, right? And he's the youngest guy coming out. I mean, it's really something special.
Yeah, I think that's super advanced and great insight. I used to watch, and I think a lot of us used to watch this on ESPN, but Gruden would do his deal where he'd have the quarterbacks come in and draw up plays, and then they'd go out on the field. And you could really tell who genuinely called plays from beginning to end and had command of the offense and who didn't. And it was quick and easy to tell from just a fan perspective. So if you have a coach come in and Trey's teaching them some stuff, that's crazy. So
yeah, it's pretty neat. It's definitely pretty neat.
So let me ask you this. So I think one of the knocks on Trey that people come up with is, well, he only had one season and it wasn't his fault, but he could not play the 2020 season. And a lot of people think he should go back to college because of that. So what are the things that you guys did specifically in this year off to really fine tune his game? And what can we expect to see from Trey the next time that we do see him? Because I would imagine that game and the way that we saw him as a 19-year-old kid versus where he's at now, we would see a completely different player potentially. So walk me through that.
Yeah, and I think that's the main point. And there's no quarterback that was hurt more with the way this process played out. Things like not having a combine, not having these, private workouts with teams than Trey. Because you're right. I mean, what you know of Trey was a year and a half ago. That was the last season he played. He had that one kind of highlight game where they're trying to hit some deep balls and try to show off a little bit, and it didn't all come together. And but talking about the resume you're looking at, it's a year and a half ago. Like, and I know what the jump he made in his development just in the last 4 or 5 months. And without a doubt, and we hope to show a little bit of that in the pro day. And you saw maybe some different things and how his footwork was more, consistent and things of that nature. We tried to show a little bit of that off, but man, I would have loved the opportunity for him to be at the combine with all those guys next to each other, making the same throws. I think you would have seen the difference. But to answer your question, the focus early on, and Trey was different because he had not had a lot of formal training his whole process from high school into college, from a development, and especially in the day and age now, it seems like everybody's got their private trainers, guys like me and Quincy, since they were in, middle school. And Trey was the exception. So he was just a really raw talent. And right away, there were like kind of little things that you realized he had never been exposed to before. The idea of how important it is to play with his full cleat in the ground. And, most athletes want to be up on their toes and be athletic. But the reality is, when we're trying to be consistent and generate stable power, we need to be grounded, right? And, things like working through a progression, right? We talk about, is it your first read guy? Can you work all the way through the progression? Well, Trey and the North Dakota State, as part of their offense, did a good job with that. And you see that all over his film. But he will also have a tendency to kind of be up and down as his eyes were moving throughout the progression. And so when your eyes are up and down and now it's time to throw, once again, that's not throwing the same way every time. And one of the things that led to some of his inconsistent accuracy in the intermediate routes, something that just working through progressions, doing a lot of drills where our eyes are leading our hips like left to right, right to left, and staying loaded throughout that motion. That right way led to him throwing the ball a lot more consistently. We worked to quicken up his arm path a little bit. One of the knocks on him, and quite honestly, it's a funny class because Justin and Trevor all kind of have the one critique is they kind of drop the ball a little bit below their elbow on their initial separation, right?
Right.
That was one of the things that we just wanted to try to clean up and accelerate the arm path a little bit, create just a more efficient motion. And sometimes that's just as simple as getting the foot in the ground quicker on the initial drive step, which then is able to accelerate the arm path as well. And, but just having these 5 months, which you never get normally in a draft prep process, to really spend the necessary time on these little things, we feel really good about the payoff that you're going to see here. Like I said, I think we got to see a little bit of it as pro day. And, whoever drafts him, I think is going to be really excited to see him when they get him in camp.
It's funny you sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, would you say that it is more important, not more important, but what do you think is better for a QB's development? Do you think it would have been better for him to play this year, or do you think it's better that he got this time to really work on those little things?
I think better is hard, right? Because I think there's definitely big arguments for both sides, but I think it's unique to the player. And in this case, I think maybe Trey was a guy that needed the mechanics development. Like, so Justin wouldn't have been, right? Justin was a guy who, has worked with guys like Quincy and myself. He works with another coach here in Georgia, Ron Veal, he's been working with since high school. He has this group of coaches and trainers that he's been seeking out his whole high school career all the way through college. So he's probably way more polished than Trey was when we started, back in October. So for Justin, I think another year of experience, especially at that level and seeing live bullets and having to win big games, that was probably more helpful for Justin, and I think he was able to be given more within their offense and things that we talked about Trey doing as a freshman, understanding protections. I think Justin started to do more of that his second year. He hadn't as much his first year, right? So for Justin, it was playing. For Trey, probably benefited maybe more by focusing on his development.
Okay. When you guys were setting up the pro day for Trey, What were some of the goals that you were really trying to showcase?
Yeah, usually the pro day is like, okay, what are the things that people think he can't do? And let's show them that, right? So you got Mac Jones's pro day, and he's trying to throw off platforming on the run, and hey, they think I'm a statue. Let me do all these other things, right? With Trey, you had the benefit of like he kind of showed him everything on film. Like I don't know how many questions there were. He can't make this throw. He's so it was really more just giving them a little taste of everything, a little reminder, right? Maybe it's been a little while since you saw him throw. Let's remind you who Trey Lance is. We wanted to throw, deep outs to the right side from the left hash and then go to the right hash and throw to the, you know what I mean? And because that's just a throw that you're going to watch 10 other quarterbacks pro days. And maybe they got it there, but it had a little extra trajectory to it. And then Trey's was that ball that maybe didn't get 7 feet off the ground the whole way, right? So we wanted to give you some of that, the deep out stuff, some deep comebacks, things of that nature to really show off the arm strength. And then some of the little subtle pocket movement, where just little interior pressure, move off the spot, get the ball out quick, right? Things that were going to really be more of what you'd expect him to have to do frequently at the next level. And then we wanted to throw as much NFL concepts in there, and this was something that was talked about a little bit during his pro day, but, there was a conscious effort between Quincy, Trey's agent to say, okay, who are these 4 or 5 quarterback hungry teams, right? So it's Atlanta, it's San Francisco, it's Carolina, right? You can rattle them off. They were definitely looking quarterbacks. And then let's run some of their concepts. Let's show him under center, working with play action, getting his head around, and then hitting that deep cross, right? That you're going to see, maybe Kyle Shanahan and his offense run, 10 times a game, right? And so you want to kind of just help the coaches and the GMs visualize that quarterback running your offense. And we just wanted to try to make that as easy as possible for him. Now, 2 weeks later, because Trey, one of the earlier pro days turned into just like just do whatever ridiculous thing you wanted to do. And if you missed 4 of them, but you hit one, well, only the one that you hit will be the one they repeat on ESPN. And, so things changed a little bit pretty quickly. But like I said, we feel really good about, we showed off his ability to throw some of the deep balls with touch and put it on the money. And we are really focused on just showing his arm strength and his velocity.
Yeah, I would say, pro days, in my opinion, can be a little bit overrated. But in Trey's case, I thought it was very important to show those things because we haven't seen it in so long. Some of these other guys we just saw play 2 months ago.
Yeah, it's supposed to not. The pro day is supposed to not matter.
Right.
And then, but this was Trey's only opportunity. He changed. We thought he was going to have the combine. I told you I was, salivating at the idea of him standing next to Trevor, Justin, whoever, Zach Wilson, and and just throw Zach throw and then Trey throw. And if you can't see the difference, I don't know what to tell you, right? But he unfortunately didn't get that opportunity. So we're fortunate that he at least had the pro day to show a little something. I think he's planning maybe doing a second pro day, just like Justin's doing here for San Fran specifically. Just to make sure, like I said, at least the NFL is allowing that you can, if guys want a second look, and we say San Fran because we're talking about San Fran here, but for Atlanta or Carolina or anybody who wants to trade up, and I'm a Bears fan, so maybe Chicago can get rid of that mess from a few years ago and figure out something to get up, and we'll figure it out. But
yeah, I'm glad that you said that because that was a question I was going to ask. Is Shanahan basically came out and said, I didn't want to go to any pro days early because we didn't want to tip our hand. And now that we're at 3, we kind of can tip our hand a little bit. And unfortunately, Lance was so early that he wasn't able to attend. So I'm glad that it sounds like there's possibly going to be a second one. And I know that there was some Zoom calls and stuff, but just seeing the ball come out of his hands, I think in person is extremely important for, if you're going to take a guy to be your franchise quarterback. So that's really cool.
I agree.
So for any team, we've talked about all the talents and all the skills and all those things. But one of the questions that I have is, as a franchise quarterback, there's so much more that goes into it. I mean, you're the face of a franchise.
Yeah.
You're the guy that's paid all the money. And it's important that, quite frankly, you represent that franchise in a good light. So with that said, How is Trey as a person? Can you give us some insight as to what type of person Trey is?
Yeah, it's Quincy and I talk about this a lot, where we say, like, I can't imagine a guy you want to spend 5 months of a draft prep, which can get, kind of long and a little tedious. Like, we couldn't imagine a guy we want to be around more for that long of a time than Trey. He's just like, first of all, he wants to be great. And so everything he does, you see that. It's very evident in that. And just to, like, how he wants his schedule for the next 3 weeks, because he wants to make sure he knows, okay, what times are we throwing, what times am I lifting, when there's the food, is what we're doing here, what meetings do I have. He's very meticulous to every detail. And he just pours it all into, especially when you're on the field or in a board session, just all he cares about is how much better he can get in that time that he has allotted to him. Super coachable, just like kind of magnetic personality, right? It's something that he shares with Justin too. You see the clips, and obviously Justin being Ohio State, you get to see a lot more of it. You get to see him dancing in the team room and everything like that. And and that's the Justin I know from the last 3 years of training. He's that way amongst the other college quarterbacks. So if he's like a college group session with Malik Willis and Jamie Newman, and he's the guy that people gravitate to, right? And Trey's got so much of that as well. He just is so focused on just wanting to make sure he never leaves until he feels like he figured something out or kind of got that next piece. He's a guy that'll never finish on a bad rep, right? And then it turns out like he'll throw 4 in a row, like just perfect, right? But he felt like he didn't quite get his hips through, or he didn't quite stop as suddenly. So then we do a 5th one, right? And then the receiver maybe drops it, and then we got to do a 6th one, right? It's like that's just kind of the way, that's just speaks to his work ethic a little bit. But he's got a maturity about him that, once again, I don't understand how he's 20 years old with kind of the way he carries himself. And then talk about what we talked about before, just the QB IQ, the love of the game of football, because you can't have the knowledge he has without just loving it, right? Like, so I know for a fact he gets on Zoom calls with head coaches, and they feel like they're talking to a colleague, right? Like the way, if you're a head coach and you're going to spend 20 hours in the film, like there's to some point you got to love it. And I think that comes across. Once again, we would have loved for it to be in person, so Trey could really show his personality in the right way. But I think even through Zoom, it just carries.
Great.
That's awesome. One of the things, Kyle Shanahan definitely has his schemes that he goes at, with the way that he attacks defenses. How do you think the Trey kind of meshes with Shanahan schematically?
Yeah, I think scheme fix been like kind of the buzz thing this last couple of years specifically, and certainly with San Francisco. I think without a doubt, and I said this earlier, you have to be able to make plays from the pocket. You have to throw well enough. Like you're going to be in 3rd and 8. And you have to be able to make a throw from the pocket for a first down, right? And you have to be able to run the offense. So I think that's a standard across the board. It's like a minimum threshold you have to meet. And I would say all the top 5, maybe even the top 10 guys in the draft meet that threshold. From there, I think it's who are the guys that can give you the extra stuff off schedule, outside the frame of the offense. And that's why guys like Trevor, Trey, and Justin, kind of separate themselves from the rest. I think everyone thinks Kyle Shanahan's fit is maybe a less mobile kind of I just think that's who he's had, right? Like, it's who he has. So, and he's, everybody thinks Kyle Shanahan is a very smart offensive mind. That's why he's had the opportunities he's had. Well, there's no chance that Kyle Shanahan isn't going to be able to adapt his scheme and his offense around the personnel and around the player he has. I think personally that he's got to be excited of having a little extra that he maybe hasn't had since RG3, right? Remember, RG3 won Rookie of the Year
Yep.
like coming at it into the NFL. Like, he found the guy who did a lot of extra different things, and he adapted his scheme to it. Now, when he's got Kirk Cousins, or he's got, Brian Hoyer, or he's got Matt Ryan, then you scheme the offense around what they do well. But I think with really Justin or Trey, you end up getting a guy who can do all the things from the pocket that Matt Ryan can do, but then he's got that little extra, right? When things break down, or when you don't put your team in the best situation, you get a guy who can make plays off schedule. To me, especially the way the game's being played now, I think that's what everybody's searching for a little bit.
Yeah. And watching the film on Trey, that's one of the things that just jumped out is you can see him running the concept. A lot of concepts that are very similar to the 49ers, but you can see that little extra. He plays really well from the pocket. He's not a guy that really wants to jump out and escape early. He really sits in there. You can see him going through his progressions and whatnot. And it's that extra, though, that he could bring to the table. You can kind of see where if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'd be really excited to be running this kind of play with him, because I'm going to be able to outsmart the defense, or, his ability. He brings something that they haven't had, right? Jimmy Garoppolo, for example, or some of these other guys aren't going to come outside of the pocket and really threaten you with a run. And that's what jumps off the table with Trey Lance.
It makes it really tough to defend. I mean, it obviously in the run game puts an extra player in the run game that you have to account for to some extent. And, I don't expect San Francisco to run Trey Lance, 15 times a game, but, the fact that you got to be aware that he can do some of that stuff, it certainly puts a stress on the defense. And so if you have to account for that, then what are you doing on your back end? But you said it. I think, Trey had games. I mean, he had the game against JMU in the snow in Fort Worth where, he's put his shoulder down, ran it 30 times, and that's how they won the game. But the majority of what you see on the film is it's scramble yards, right? It's him with a called pass play, working first progressing, second progressing. It's a little cloudy, doesn't see, gets some pressure, has to move, and then escapes late, right? So now there's this extra fifth option in a 4-concept pass play that, a lot of quarterbacks in the league aren't giving you. And obviously Trey is very unique in that aspect of being able to create that.
Right on. Let me ask you this, and we'll end on this one.
Yeah.
So I come from a sales background, and there's something called an elevator pitch where you basically have 30 seconds to sell somebody on a product, right?
Sure.
So I know that Trey and Justin are the guys that you've worked with most.
Yeah.
So we'll start with Justin. Give me just a couple things as to why I would look at Justin maybe as opposed to a Mac Jones or a Zach Wilson. If I'm the 49ers, what should I be intrigued about with Justin as a prospect?
I think Justin's kind of the simple sell. Justin's the guy who's done it at the highest level. If the knock on him is that he never won a national championship, man, getting there twice and playing incredibly in both semifinal games and in the national championship game, although it didn't go their way, you saw him do it at the highest level. He's got probably the strongest, if not second strongest arm in this draft class, combined with 4.4 speed.
Yeah.
To me, it's just, you've seen it. You've seen it since he was a senior in high school. You saw it every step of the way. You look at a guy like Zach Wilson who, had this one exciting year this year. But then you have to ask about the previous year, right? There isn't any of that with Justin. If guys are trying to nitpick like the Indiana game, it's like, we're talking about he had 2 years where he was, Heisman runner-up and like in the final mix there, did everything he could, won every single game until the national championship games and played incredibly well in those 2 games. So to me, he's put it all out there resume wise. It's really hard for me to understand what you're not seeing with Justin. Okay.
And we'll do the same thing for Lance.
Yep. For Trey, like I said, you're certainly having to go on what he is more than maybe what you've seen fully yet. Okay. So what I mean there is, once again, you're looking at just a uniquely talented quarterback. Big, strong arm, velocity. Maybe not 75-yard deep ball, which doesn't matter, but look at the way he throws the 20 to 40-yard throw with low trajectory. I don't know that there's another quarterback who has that ability to throw the football. You look at just what he is from a QB IQ standpoint, understanding offenses, understanding how to lead, do all the intangible stuff, combined with just the athletic ability. To me, Trey has the highest upside of anybody coming out of the draft, Justin included. Part of that's because Justin's so polished now and you already see it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, I think Trey's got this ceiling, and you're seeing glimpses of it, and you're like, we see it now because we've seen him over the last year and see what he is now. So, it's to me, like I said, Trevor, I think, is Trevor. And to me, after that, and right in there in that mix, to me, Trey and Justin are the ones that jump off the page at you.
Mm-hmm.
And guys that are searching or seeking for other guys to put in that mix, it's hard for me to see it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Coach, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This was a fantastic interview. I know that whether it's a 49er fan watching or a fan of another team that may be looking at a quarterback, I think they got a lot of questions answered, and you're a big reason to that. I want to thank you for the time. Now, I want to say that I put your website down in the description. I've put the Quarterback Takeover website down in the description. I put your Twitter handle down in the description. Is there anything else that I missed that you would want people to know about?
No, I was going to say, you got us covered, man. So it's QB Coach McEvoy on everything, Twitter and Instagram and everything else. So very easy to find, and Quarterback Takeover stuff, I'm sure people are seeing all over social media as well. So I really appreciate you, man.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
You got it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Jack, let me switch this overlay real quick, and then we'll wrap up here. Gosh, what a great interview that was.
Yeah, what a great guy.
Yeah,
a lot of good information and just really expansive with his answers as well.
Yeah, he gave us a lot. What are the couple of things that you took away from the interview?
The number one thing for me was the fact, I was aware that Lance was making a lot of calls at the line of scrimmage. Yeah. I didn't realize that he was actually getting up to the line of scrimmage and making the play call. That was something that I had not heard or was aware of. You can see when you watch him on the film, you can see him doing a lot of communicating, so I could see him maybe changing out between one player or another. But the fact that he's getting up to the line of scrimmage, seeing the defensive formation and set up, and then making the call after that's really impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I was already a Trey Lance guy from the beginning. When the 49ers traded up, I was like, Trey's got to be it. And I just see a special talent. I can't put a comp on it. I know that, he said that was something that he doesn't necessarily like to do, which is fair, but we all like to do that as fans or analysts or what have you. And he's the one guy that I just couldn't put my finger on. And that's because he is such a special talent. And just seeing him talk about Trey in such a glowing light, I mean, you could just see it on his face. He's really excited about this guy. He has a genuine excitement about him. And I'm excited to see him at the next level. And gosh, I hope it's with the 49ers, because this guy is going to be something special. I can just feel it. And he answered all the questions maybe that I would have had about him that could be a knock about him. I feel comfortable with it. So if the 49ers get either one of these guys, whether it's Fields or Lance, I think they're getting a very good player. But to me, Lance he has that extra it factor that you can't put a finger on.
It's an interesting conversation to have, because there's so many people that really want Justin Fields, and there's a lot of good film on Justin Fields. There's a lot of times where he's making plays, but I think in the amount of film work that I've done with these two guys in the last couple of weeks, especially as I've been going through my own breakdown shows, the one thing that jumps out to me is Trey Lance is the better pocket quarterback between the two. People might argue whatever, they can give me whatever stats they want. When you watch the game, he is much more poised in the pocket, on a regular basis. He's much more consistent in the pocket. I guess that might be the best way to put it.
Yeah.
He's just more consistent with what he does there than Justin Fields. And he throws a heck of a deep ball.
Yeah,
it's funny because, you know, his deep ball stats aren't that great either, but you start watching his film and you'll see, you know, the last film breakdown I did on Trey was a couple of deep balls that were incompletions, and neither one of them were his fault. He had one that the receiver's out there and just kind of trips and falls down. Otherwise it's going to be a money.
Right.
And another one where he has a guy running the post that's wide open and the receiver just stops at the top of his route for whatever reason.
Right.
You know, so there's little things like that you don't see if you're not really watching. And you're probably not even going to see it if you're watching on TV just because you don't have the angle. And so, you know, I've talked about this before with you. I don't really watch college football a whole lot during the season. I just don't have time. So for me, watching these guys, I'm watching all 22, and that's where I'm making my judgments on. So I don't have the predetermined because I don't know. When you watch the games on TV, there's just a lot you miss, no matter how much you don't want to believe it.
For sure. Yeah, I think the one thing that a lot of people bring up, and I think he answered this so beautifully, but one of the things that people bring up is, well, he played at an FCS college. He's by far the most talented guy. And there's a mental side of the game that people are not seeing, even if they are watching film necessarily. They're not picking up on these things. And the way that he's so eloquently put that he is coming up to the line and everything is on him. I know that a lot of people had mentioned that, well, he'll come up and he'll call the protections, which was unique compared to some of these guys because a lot of times the center will do it. But he's calling everything from top to bottom. He's not looking at the sideline and figuring out what the coach wants to run. And to do that at 19 years old at that level is so impressive. And anybody that had a question about Lance, even if he's not your favorite guy at this point, I feel like those questions have got to certainly be answered at this point. And you've at least got to think like, wow, what did I miss with Lance? And should he be the 49ers guy?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially the one point that he was making. And I was going to jump in, but I didn't get a chance to mention it because he brought it up himself. Coach McEvoy did.
Yeah.
The how Lance had the ability, he was kind of doing this.
Right.
And how that was causing his inaccuracy. And that was something that really showed up on his film in 2019 at times. You can really see it, especially in the game against James Madison, you know, at the end of the year. That was probably one of his rougher games. Yeah. And you could really see his head going up and down in the pocket. And you could see there'd be times when he'd be standing nice and tall. And then as he'd go to throw, he'd go from here to down here.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, and that was a perfect explanation as to why his balls were coming up, his throw would come up short. So it's interesting to see that they noticed that, and it's great to hear that they've been really working to fix that and correct those kind of things, because that's one of the biggest issues that I had with him.
Right. Well, Jack, great show. Thanks for joining me again. I think next week we'll probably do it on your platform. We'll get back over there. Anybody that tuned in, I know that we normally get to your questions. Tonight we just didn't have time. We wanted to make sure that everybody was able to understand exactly what kind of prospects that Justin and Trey are, and we wanted to hear it from a guy who's worked with both of them. So we wanted to make sure that the floor was his, really, quite frankly. So get your questions ready. Next week, we will definitely answer them. And until next time, have a great night.